Tuesday, which means it's time for the Screencast. Those of you taking courses with me before, you know that I sometimes use this as a point of academic development, right? But I think we've been accomplishing that with the lectures and the Zoom calls. So instead, I'm going to keep with this idea that this time is really devoted to giving you a sense of how the course is developing, in the sense of like where you are in it and where I'm expecting you to go. I'm going to talk a little bit about upcoming assignments so you can get ready for them. So hopefully now, having completed the first briefing paper, you get a sense of why this kind of material is important, right? It gives you an idea of how to think about the sort of pursuit of national interest in a particular set of circumstances. And I tried last week in the lecture to illustrate what some of those circumstances are, which are some of the nature of the international system, the alternatives that are available to particular individual states that you may want to leverage, how that does and does not open up opportunities for leverage by great powers over other states, the importance of other institutions, right, and the fact of alternatives, and then environmental considerations, right, which shape whether or not something can or cannot be used as a point of geopolitical leverage, right? So if you haven't had a chance to do that, or I talk about that and that didn't really sound familiar, it might be a good opportunity to sort of rethink and go back to that lecture from last week. And then what I asked you to do is to sort of take stock. So one of the things that was supposed to happen in writing the policy briefing is, by putting yourself in that position, you're forced with the idea of, well, if I had to explain to somebody, you know, what geoeconomic policy is, or it's flawed or where it's not, this is what I would do, right? Hopefully that sets you up to begin developing your understanding for the other two assignments in the course, which is a policy briefing on a very specific geoeconomic thing, policy, domain, whatever you want to call it, which is energy. And then the white paper, which is going to come in a few weeks, which is supposed to be like you staking out your position on where geoeconomics should go, leveraging all we've learned about concepts and alternatives and costs and things like that from our readings. So having established how to write about geoeconomics in general, really what's going to happen over the next two modules is that we're going to discuss individual examples, right? We're going to talk about energy this week, and we're going to talk about the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative next week. And what I think is really important, and what I want to preface here, is that what you're going to hopefully take away from these two units is that it's impossible to sort of clarify these two things in a nice linear narrative, right? So energy is a multi sort of faceted kind of thing. It holds geoeconomic potentials and limitations for all of what it makes it possible for us to do to constrain our adversaries. Our adversaries have alternatives, and then also the nature of the system itself is going to really impact the viability of that tool. The same is true for the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and I hope that when we come out of next week, you'll have a sense of the Belt and Road Initiative as maybe not the massive sort of globe-trotting, world-defining initiative that it sometimes gets defined, but also not as something that we can just sort of dismiss away, right? So what I wanted you to know is that the next 2 weeks are really designed in order to stack on themselves and able to allow you an opportunity to write about a very particular geoeconomic domain, which is energy. So this week, we're going to talk specifically about the idea of energy and great power competition, a sort of avowedly geoeconomic discussion where we talk about something deeply important to our economy, which is energy, its production, its distribution, its use, its viability as a form of geoeconomic power, and what it means to invest in things and think about things, not just in terms of economic growth, not just in terms of geoeconomic power, but in both, right? So this week, I really want you to focus on that when you do your discussion posts, and think about sort of the fact that in the following week, you are going to have to write a policy briefing about the nature of energy and U.S. national interest, right? So I've kept going with this idea that you're sort of going through the life cycle of an inside the Beltway person, right? Not necessarily that you have to do that or you want to, just to sort of give rhetorical context to this. But in this week, you've left government and you've made your way to K Street and are now sort of making lots of money as a consultant. And what you've been asked to do is to actually sort of work for a sustainable energy company and trying to figure out whether or not they should invest billions in the development of sustainable energy networks in the U.S. within the context of sort of this larger geoeconomic focus, right? So what you're basically going to do, and I know people who actually have this job. They work for banks or hedge funds or consulting firms, and their job is to engage with clients who are thinking about large investments, thinking about how to arbitrage risk, and asking people about sort of the international climate. What you're going to do there is really think through this idea of how energy creates a domain in which we can realize geoeconomic power. Now, I'm going to talk more about this as we get closer, but I do want you to be aware of where we're going with this assignment structure, right? So the assignment structure, once you've developed your skills both in thinking about geoeconomics politically and then applying it to particular domains to think about risk and potential, you're going to actually stipulate your own sort of perspective on U.S. national interest. And that's going to come in the way of a white paper, right? So white papers are they do exist in government a lot. They take their name from the fact that they're usually printed off, with the office printer and distributed informally. But they're designed to stipulate a specific perspective of a body, and then just allow that perspective to be vetted by other stakeholders and the popular public, right? So what you're going to do is do that. So what I wanted to make very clear, right, in case you're sort of wondering where all this is going, and hopefully this starts to put things like the Blackwell reading and the Baldwin reading into context, right? Those are meant to be specific tools that help you conceptualize how to think about geoeconomics and then give you a primer, right, on the current state of geoeconomics, right? So Baldwin's the first one, Blackwell and Harris is the second one. And then the assignments are really helping you sort of develop your analytical skills so that you can progress from simply describing, right, geoeconomics and risks to actually making sort of fundamentally prescriptive or analytical judgments about it. Okay, so looking forward to seeing all of you, or those who can make it, in the Zoom call on Thursday night. Watch out for the lecture tomorrow. If you have any questions, do remember that I have my office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time. Details are in the Canvas shell. But if you do need to talk to me at a different time, you can always reach out to me and make an alternative arrangement. All right, so happy reading. Looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.